All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be with you today. Mike Tafui put in the chat box, I noticed, that day one of quarter two, which is exactly right. So we're starting the second quarter of 2020. And I don't know about you guys, but when I woke up this morning, I realized it's April 1st. This has all been an April Fool's joke, and it's going to be back to normal today. And then I'm not so sure that's true, but we're going to hope anyway, right? All right. Well, hopefully you got some good gratitudes written down, and just, if you want to share a few of those in the chat box, I think that'll be awesome for people to be able to see some of the things that you're grateful for. So for me, I am so grateful. The sun's shining here in Salt Lake, and it's going to be a great day today. So I'm excited for where we're headed. Well, all right. Well, this morning, I want to talk with you guys today. I want to share with you some thoughts and some things about pricing with you today. Now, as we do that, though, I first want to start with, and I wish that we were in a scenario that we could interact a lot easier than we're able to right now. But your number one job. Now, hopefully you have heard John and George say this enough times that you understand, but your number one job in this business is to be a leader. And you have heard George say that so many times over the past couple of weeks about don't run and hide, don't go stick your head in a hole. Let's be leaders. Let's stand up, be ready, and let's just know, hey, yes, we've had an adjustment to how we're living and the things that we're having to do right now, no question, but let's lead. People need the leadership. Now, the number one skill that a leader has is communication. And so through your communication, and we're going to talk about pricing today, but I got to get these pieces in place because it's through your communication that you're going to lead these people to the right price. And leaders are able to get people to focus on the right things. So just keep in mind, your number one job is to be a leader. Your skill that you've got to use as a leader is your communication. And what you would need to use that communication to do is to be able to have people focus on the right things. Okay, so just keep in mind as we go through and talk about this. Now, I am going to be teaching a class tomorrow that I'm going to be talking about the listing presentation. So watch for an email to come out on that. It'll be at 10 o'clock tomorrow, Utah time, 9 o'clock in California, that I'm going to go through and be talking about the listing presentation. So we will talk about some of the pieces of, using video and some of those things, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about to you tomorrow about is going to be just the listing presentation, because I think especially when you're going to be doing listing presentations via Zoom, you have to have the presentation part dialed in. And here's why. We lose a little bit of the connection that we have with someone when we're doing it over video. It is so easy to get distracted. I'm sure some of you already right now can relate to that. You're pulling up, you're looking at Facebook while you're listening to me, you're doing other things. Guess what's going to happen when you're on with a Zoom call on a listing presentation? The same kind of stuff. They're going to get distracted. The kids are running in, talking to them. All kinds of different things are going. So because of that, you need to have your presentation really, really dialed in. So we're going to go through that tomorrow. And as I said, 10 o'clock Utah time, 9 a.m. in California. Now, there are two parts to a listing presentation. So we're not going to go through all of this today. I'm going to cover it tomorrow, but there's two parts. The first part is about choose me. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow in that listing presentation class. The second part is after they have chosen you, now we can talk about the price of the home. So keep in mind, that's where we're going to go today, is talking about pricing and how you, as part of your presentation, need to lead them to the right price. But then also, if you're not able to get them to the right price, how do we now set up a pricing strategy that will help them to get to the right price as we work through this? Because here's the thing, we don't know for sure what this is going to be doing to the market, meaning in terms of our pricing and things. I can't tell you. I wish I knew that we could say, hey, in 2 weeks, this is over, everything's going to get back to normal. I don't know. Hopefully it does. But if it doesn't, we need to be prepared, and we need to be preparing our clients on pricing their home as we go out and list it for that very scenario. I remember going through this in 2008, 2009, and the sellers get stuck on, and we'll talk about this in a second, that this is where the price is. And so our job is to be able to lead them, help them future pace where they need to go. Now, there's 3 pieces to this in order for you to helping a seller get the property priced right. The first thing we have to do is be able to understand the seller. Remember, I just said, part of the challenge that I think we're going to have in these Zoom meetings is we've got to work really hard on getting that connection. When you're not in person with somebody, you're going to have to be a little more focused on repeating and affirming, making sure that they're heard, that you're empathizing with them. You got to do all of those things so that they know and can feel that connection. So we've got to understand a couple of things about the seller, which we'll talk about in a minute. Then once we have that, now we can start to work on some of our skills. Some of the skills we've got to have is we got to anticipate what their objections are. And you need to be willing to own those objections, because what's going to happen is they are going to have them. And the good news on that, though, is they don't change. The objections, at least for me, in the 24, coming up to 25 years now of me doing this, the objections haven't changed. I don't think even with the current circumstances, the objections are going to change. Meaning, they're going to say, I want to wait till this is over. That's probably the most common objection you're going to hear is, I want to wait till this is over. But guess what? Last year, when it was winter, what did they say? I want to wait till the spring. In the spring, what did they say? I want to wait till summer. In the summer, they want to wait till fall. In the fall, it doesn't change. So yes, it's a different thing of saying, I want to wait for the virus to be over. But as you heard George say the other day, life is like the seasons. So we will come out of this. Spring is coming. We're going to get through this. So we've got to own those objections. And then the third piece is we need to have a pricing process. And I'm going to talk with you about that today as we go through this. So keep those things in mind. Now, I want to share with you, though, as part of this, about a scenario on a listing that I took. And this was just a few years ago. And I got to give you the background on it so that you can understand how I used this process that we're going to talk about right now. Is what I did is I had gotten a call from my brother-in-law. So this was an SOI phone call from my brother-in-law. He said his parents had a cabin up in Big Cottonwood Canyon. So for those in Utah will know where that's at, in California, just up closer to the ski resorts here. And they have a cabin that their family has owned for the last 60 years. So their parents built it 60 years ago. The parents kept it until the parents passed away. They then willed it to their daughter and their son, who are now on title as joint tenants for this cabin. Well, what ended up happening was I get a call from my brother-in-law about his dad. And when I got the call from him, what he told me is, here's what happened, is it's been in his and his sister's name for, I think, 20 years plus, maybe even close to 30. I can't remember for sure. But between 20 and 30 years, it's been in their name. Well, during that time, the sister would use that cabin every weekend. So she would work in Salt Lake all week long. Friday, she would leave work early. She would drive up to this cabin up in Big Cottonwood Canyon, and she would stay there until Sunday night and sometimes even Monday morning. Then she would drive down and go to work. So she would use it every single weekend. Well, my brother-in-law's dad, the brother, he would use it 2-3 times a year was all. They would, take some vacation, go up and spend some time at the cabin. Well, the summer before I got this phone call, what happened is the sister, her husband had now passed away. And so she went to her brother and she said to him, I am going to change my name on title because of her husband passing away. And so she said, I just need you to sign this document that is going to take the property out of what her name was to what she was changing it to. And her brother said, oh, okay. Well, he knows really nothing about real estate, so he didn't even stop to look at the document. So he goes ahead and he signs this document. Well, after he signs this document, a few months later comes back to him and she says, okay, I want to now sell this cabin. You really don't ever use it. I want to sell my house in Salt Lake. I want to sell the cabin, and I'm going to buy a condo that was up near one of the ski resorts. And the brother said, well, that's fine. You're right. We don't really use it that much, and we're getting older. It's probably a good time to do that. So he goes ahead, he signs or agrees that he's going to sell the property. She then tells him, though, that the document that he had signed the summer before was actually a quitclaim deed that was changing the title from being in joint tenancy to tenants in common, with her owning 2/3 of the cabin, him owning 1/3 of the cabin. And her justification for this was, well, you don't really use it that much. I've used it a lot more than you do, so that's why we're going to do this. Well, as you can imagine, now all of a sudden he's upset. This is when they start to call me. They go each get their own attorney that they're talking to about this. And so in the process, she has someone she wants to list the home with. He has someone, me, that he wants to list the home with. And of course, this is very similar to a divorce situation. Only the difference is it's a brother and sister that are now having a family feud instead of a divorce. But what happens is she agrees she'll interview me. He agrees he'll interview her agent. Now, her agent actually lives up in the canyon as well that she wanted to use. And so her justification for using that agent was because they lived up in Big Cottonwood Canyon. They worked up there and they sold homes. And she then asked me, well, how many homes have you sold up in Big Cottonwood Canyon? And I'll tell you, to that point, I had sold 0 houses up in Big Cottonwood Canyon. So for me, I was at a little bit of a disadvantage. Now, here's the good news. Because I'm with Everest, though, I jumped on the MLS. I did a search to see how many of the properties that have sold up there in the last year was Everest a part of them. Now, here's the good news. We were on probably half of the properties that had sold up that canyon. And as I looked to see how many that agent or the company that agent had been on was actually less than what Everest was. So I now had that to my advantage. So I sat down with her and I went through the process that I'm going to talk about with you tomorrow in terms of building that connection. I asked a ton of questions. I wanted to find out about her. Now, as I sat there and asked her question after question, and I was using things like this, when you are building these connections, especially in today's world, you got to be asking, help me understand, share with me, describe for me what your ideal scenario looks like. So share with me, help me understand, describe for me, tell me about. We want to be using those open-ended questions that are having them now share with us. So I did that. In the process of her sharing that with me, what happened is we started to build this connection. Well, because of building that connection, I was able to start asking her more and more questions. And as I asked question after question after question with her, I could feel that we were building that connection. Well, at the end of the presentation with her, she said to me, wow, I wish that I would have had you help me sell my house in Sugar House, so the one in Salt Lake. Now, she wouldn't have done that had I not built the connection and understood her and got to know what she was trying to accomplish. So you've got to start with that. And so in terms of our pricing, we first got to build that connection with them. Now, part of what you need to do and part of what you need to understand in this building the connection and finding out from them. Now, I'll finish the story with you in just a minute of what ended up happening with this, because it didn't automatically, she say, yes, I'll list with you at that point. But what happens though is you got to keep in mind, with a seller, there are 2 hurdles that we have to overcome with in terms of these sellers. The first one is something that is called the endowment effect. Now, what the endowment effect is, this term was actually coined by a psychologist by the name of Richard Thaler. Now, what he said is this endowment effect, essentially what he said is, my stuff is more valuable than it really is. Now, you know as well as I do, when you go out on these presentations and you talk to sellers, they end up saying things to you like, well, yeah, but my house is better than that one, right? We all are getting that type of a response from these sellers is, but my house is better. Now, here's the thing that you need to understand where they're coming from on that. When they say that to you, it totally makes sense because in their mind, their house is better than every other one. Now, why is that? The reason their house is better in their mind than every other house out there is if you stop and think about it, when they went out looking for homes to buy, what did they do? They were comparison shopping. As they're comparison shopping, they came across the home they bought, and in their mind, it was the best home that was out there. Now, as a result of it being the best home, they move in, they decorate it the way they want, They may have remodeled it to how they want to do it. They've got their landscape in exactly how they want it. All of those things make sense of why their house is the best one on the market. Now, here's the key thing of helping them understand is you understand that to them, it is the best home. This is the empathy piece. Hey, I understand where you're coming from. If I were you, I would probably think this is the best house out there as well. Now, here's the thing we got to get them to understand. When we're helping a seller sell their house, we're not looking for the highest bidder on the home, because guess who the highest bidder on their house is always going to be? Them. They're always going to be the highest bidder. So we're not looking for the highest bidder. And this is what you want to share with them. We're not looking for the highest bidder on your home. What we're looking for in this is we need to find the second highest bidder, because Mr. and Mr. Seller, you are probably going to be the highest bidder on this home. You've decorated it exactly how you want. You liked it the best when you chose it. So all of this is overcoming that endowment effect, is where they just feel like, because I own it, it's worth more than anybody else's. So if you can help them to understand that we need to find the second highest bidder, not the highest bidder, because as long as they're the highest bidder on the house, guess what? They get to keep the house. That's just the way it works. All right, the next thing on this is what we call anchoring. So these are the two things you got to overcome in terms of pricing, is the endowment effect, and then the second one is anchoring. In terms of anchoring, what is happening with that is they get fixed on a price. Now, here's what's the struggle that potentially we are going to have in this market going forward, is this anchoring. Is they put down an anchor as to what they feel like the price is, and they get stuck on that. I had a seller, this goes back into, I can't remember if it was 2009 or 10, I think it was 9. In 2009, I had a seller that was a neighbor of mine for many, many years. The parents both passed away. They needed to sell the home, and I went out there to sit down and talk to them. And I had told them, look, their market's changing, prices are starting to go down. We need to make sure that we are adjusting and being prepared for that. And that's how we need to be communicating with the sellers today. We need to be prepared. We don't know what's going to happen. We hope the prices stay the same, but if they don't, we need to be prepared. And if we're prepared, we're going to be okay, and we're going to be able to get this done. So that's what I told this seller that was someone I went to high school with, that her parents had now died. So we're trying to sell their house. And I said, look, we have just got to be prepared to adjust if the market tells us that's what we need to do. So I showed her the comparables, and then what I did, and this is what we need to make sure we are doing with our sellers right now, is when you list a property, tell them, we need to get back together again in 3 to 4 weeks and look at what has happened and what is happening on the market. Your job becomes more important than ever today of letting them know you understand the market, you speak the language. Your job, you in essence become an interpreter of what the market is saying to the seller. And so you are going to weekly be interpreting that to them. Now we know what that means is if we're getting no showings and we're getting no offers, we need to reduce the price. If we're getting some showings and no offers, we need to reduce the price. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. But we've got to overcome this anchoring. And the anchoring is saying, hey, look, I get it. I understand why you're thinking that. Because they're going to have seen a price before all of this craziness took place, and they're going to be stuck to it. Now, like I said, I'm crossing my fingers that we come out of this and prices stay where they are. But just in case they don't, we need to be prepared. And that's how I would communicate that to the sellers. We just need to be prepared because we don't know for sure what is going to happen. Now, once we have overcome the endowment effect and this anchoring, the next piece that we've got to be able to do is take them through a pricing process. Now, in my mind, there's 5 steps to this pricing process, or taking them through the pricing of this. The first is just educating them. Now, when I say educating them, what I'm talking about is we discuss what their job is and what my job is. Their job is to adjust to the market, keep the home looking good. My job is to get the exposure to the property and also interpret what the market is saying to them. And then the second piece, so that first is educate. The second now thing that they need to do is, or that we need to do as part of this pricing process, is own their objections. They're going to come back and say, yeah, but my home is worth more than my neighbor's, or I can wait a little longer, whatever. They're going to come up with some of these objections. And as I said, the good news is there's only about 10. And as long as you know them and you are prepared and role playing and practicing, you're going to be prepared and be just fine to handle their objections. The next is we need to now explain to them the market. So the third piece of this in pricing is giving them what's going on in the market. So explaining at this macro level, here's what's going on in the market. Let's identify the trends. So think of it that way, as part of it is identifying what are the trends that's going on in the market. Now, as I said, we don't know exactly for sure what's going to take place with those trends, but educating them, here's what's been going on, and here's what I'm seeing so far. So let me give you what I would be saying right now today to a seller is our inventory is starting to climb, but even with it starting to climb, it is still way low for what it should be. I have been tracking this for over 10 years, close to 15 now. And I will tell you that in 2006, 2007, when prices were skyrocketing, there were twice as many homes for sale as there are today. So our inventory is still way, way, way low. Now, what that means, though, is we don't know for sure how many buyers are being afraid of everything that's going on. How many that are on furlough, those type of things. So we got to be prepared for that. So that's how I would be revealing this market data. So the first is educate. Second is we got to just own the objections that they're going to throw out at us. Third is we are going to reveal the market data to them. And then the fourth thing that we need to do, and this is present to them pricing strategies. They really have three choices when it comes to a pricing strategy. And the first one is that they price it above the market. Not ever, in my opinion, the best way to go about it. I have sold a lot of iPhones on eBay, and every time that I have done that, I start the price of that at 1 penny. I have never sold it for a penny. Every time I have sold those, the market drives the price up. So their first option in terms of pricing is to price above the market. Excuse me, I gotta wipe my nose here. So the second strategy is that we price it with the market. So we want to talk to them about what would happen if we price it with the market. If we price with the market, that could potentially work as long as they're okay with it maybe taking a little bit longer on getting the home sold. And then the third, which is the recommendation especially that I would be going with today, is that we price it a little bit below. So we want to look at what are the comparables saying, what are the actives saying, and we need to be priced in one of the top 1, 2, or 3 of those, depending on the area that you're at, if we want to get this home sold. But then the fifth thing that we need to do, so let me just make sure you got them. First is we educating them on what their role is, what my role is. Second, we need to be prepared and presenting to handle their objections. Third, we're giving them the market information. Fourth, we're going to then talk to them about our pricing strategies. And then the fifth thing is we're going to talk about them. What are the consequences that come about if we ignore the market? If we think we're pricing it good, but we end up being too high, what do we need to do? Now, let me come back to my story on this cabin so that I can finish it off, because this is what I had to do on this. Was I went and met with her, did the interview that I told you about. Her brother met with her agent. They basically negotiated back and forth, finally landed on that they would list it with me. But the agreement was they would list it with me so he got to choose the agent, she got to choose the price, which what I figured out she was really trying to do with that was the agreement was she would list it with me for 6 months, but she got to choose the price. And her thinking was that then at the end of that 6 months, she could then list it with someone else. Well, what she didn't know was I had this strategy in place that we've been talking about. So I went and sat down with her and I said, okay, I'll list it at whatever price you want to list it at, because that's the agreement that you guys made. So that's fine. But we need to have a strategy in place if we really want to get this property sold. Now, one of the things that I learned in doing my research, and this is where, again, identifying the market trends and understanding it is so important. In my research that I did up there, what I found is during the summer months is when the market is hot for these cabins. That's when the property is going to sell. If it doesn't sell by about October, it's not selling until March or April. So because of me doing that, I sat down and said to her, look, if you really want to get into this new condo up by the ski resort, I really took advantage of that and casted the vision. Remember, your job as a leader is to get them to focus. So I got her focused on the condo at the ski resort before the snow falls, because that's what she wanted. I said, if we're going to do that, we can go ahead and list it at your price, but here's what we need to do. We need to have a pricing strategy. And here's what the pricing strategy looks like. If we go 3 weeks with no offers, no showings, we need to reduce the price between 7 and 10%. If we get some showings, and I define that as 1 to 3 a week, and no offers after 3 weeks, we need to reduce the price between 5 and 7%. She said, okay. Now, because of what I had seen transpire with this, and this is what I would recommend for you guys even today, is when you list a property, talk about this pricing strategy and talk to them about no showings, no offers, we're reducing between 5 and 7, or excuse me, 7 and 10. Some showings, no offers, 5 to 7%. I went as far with her as actually putting an addendum to the listing agreement that said, if we have no showings, no offers, after 3 weeks, the price will be reduced by 7%. If we get some, and then I put in parentheses 1 to 3 in a week, and no offers in 3 weeks, we will reduce the price 5%. Well, as you can imagine, just like in a divorce situation, even though this wasn't, they both take it to their attorneys. The attorneys look at it. His attorney says, good with me. Her attorney looks at it and says, we're not going to do that. We'll end up giving the property away. If it doesn't sell, we could just keep reducing the price forever and then eventually just give it to someone, which, as you know, that's never going to happen. But here's what he proposed instead, and I loved this. He came back and said, instead of that, in 3 weeks, and he put the dates, so every 3 weeks he put the date, the price will be reduced from this to this. And then 3 weeks later, it'll be reduced from this to this. And then 3 weeks later, it'll be reduced from this to this. And if it doesn't sell by that time, then we'll talk about it. Well, for me, the strategy that he put in place, the attorney came back with in counter to what I put on there, was actually better than what I even came up with, because I looked at it and I knew we're going to get it sold before we hit that third price reduction. I knew it would, because that's where it should have been priced. So what ended up happening is we put it on the market. We listed it for $435,000, if I remember right. The first week we got a full price offer. And I was like, what the heck is this? Now, what usually happens though when you get an offer on a property that's overpriced? That's what happened on this. The buyer comes back, tries to negotiate the price down, ends up canceling, and they did. And then we went 3 weeks with no showings, no offers. We reduced the price. As soon as we reduced the price down to that one, we actually then did get an offer. So we ended up selling it for higher than what I thought we would. But here's the point. Having a strategy and a process in place that will allow them to just follow the process, you're going to get your properties sold. So, hey, thanks for being with me today. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to me. We can talk more about it. But plan on for tomorrow that we are going to be doing the listing presentation, where I'm going to take you through that whole thing from the top to the bottom, where we're going to spend, and I've got it scheduled for 2 hours. I'm just not sure how a 2-hour Zoom thing's going to go. We'll see how that goes tomorrow. But I'm planning on it from 10 to noon in Utah, 9 to 11 in California. So let's go ahead and wrap up now with some affirmations. So stand up.